Hey, what's up guys? Today we are bringing here for you a work a little more different from the others that I bring here for you. In today's work, we will follow that XAO Yan, who basically had almost everything. But in the end, he was betrayed by that girlfriend of his. But yeah, besides being betrayed, he ended up kind of dying in the end. But before all that, the world basically recognized the appearance of some beings from other universes. And because of that, some people just out of nowhere managed to transform into zombies. And because of that, they attacked wildly any human they ended up seeing in front of them, and so in the end, the world was in decline, heading for destruction. So our protagonist out of nowhere ended up holding in his hand a token, a guard token. But he realized that this thing was not from his normal world. And in this place, he found a bear that had an extremely dangerous appearance, but there was also a fox that called herself Suji. And at this moment, she ends up wondering who was the guy that managed to defeat the Shan dynasty alone, or maybe in a team, because it was necessary for Lian Xin and also Zhuge Ween to be involved. Moreover, even with all this, it was also necessary to have help from something else, because even those entities needed to come down to capture certain things. But now he asks himself why they are somehow trapped in this hell. But to understand all this, we need to go back a little to a slightly red full moon in some completely abandoned building. We observe some people on top of that building. At this moment, one of the guys, along with a girl, was beating a guy mercilessly. While he was being beaten, the scene is also cut to a side near him where an extremely large monster appears. This big monster then starts to destroy everything in front of it, cities, cars, and all that. It begins to move toward XAO Yan, along with its army of zombies. The people left behind were just devoured, while others ran, but others mocked a person. This was our hero who ended up falling on the ground, but not satisfied with that. They grabbed some gasoline and threw it over our hero. Now here, she asks him not to hold any grudges, since perhaps they would meet in a next life. But before leaving, she would be taking everything he had, even a token. He then, after seeing this token, becomes surprised. After becoming surprised, a huge bear appears in that place. At that moment, after appearing, he ends up explaining that his sister once had this extremely powerful token in her hand. But unfortunately, she was one of those who didn't like lending things to her friends. But since he was a nice guy, he had to go and take it by force anyway. And despite her and that BXA guy being quite useless, she had one thing better than our hero, her blood. Her blood could make this gigantic bear here be summoned. At this moment, knowing that, we observe down below where that giant zombie was getting closer and closer to them, while the people below end up asking for that bear to be used as quickly as possible to attack the zombies below them so they could get rid of it all. Seeing the bear, they get happy, but then they end up going up. He ends up kind of discovering one thing. Our hero likes fire, and so he is handing over to Xiaoyan the thing he likes the most, a lighter. Then it falls over him. While it was slowly falling over him, we observe from another place the giant bear getting closer and closer to those extremely huge zombies. After a while, the bear and the zombies clash there in some sort of punch. After this, a huge shockwave ends up receding in all directions, and this shockwave approaches our hero. While at that moment here he was being roasted. But even so, in this situation, he only had one wish: to have a next life. If he had a next life, he wouldn't make the same mistakes. And one of them is not letting this kind of people, like now here, survive in his other life. So, right, he wished this from the bottom of his heart. The wish, in the end, maybe ends up becoming reality, since a voice appeared deep in his heart and said, okay, right, it liked XAO Yan, so it will be giving him a second chance. It will be curious to see how strong he will become, and so he ends up closing his eyes. But also suddenly, he ends up opening them. He stands up startled. He asks himself what was happening, thinking everything was a dream. Quickly then, he gets up and tries to ask himself what was happening, if everything he had just experienced was a dream or reality. Then he takes his bell there and realizes that, for some reason, He went back in time because today there was 2028. Now, knowing all of this, he realizes he went back 3 days before the apocalypse really started in his world. And now that everything has really restarted, he can be doing some things differently. But approaching the mirror, he notices something different about himself. One of his eyes was glowing like fire. Knowing that perhaps this is maybe one of his abilities that he gained before dying in that fire there, we observe him then not wasting time. He puts on a cloak and then leaves through the doors and goes to a certain corner. Now that, right, he left his own house, he realizes that, right, everything was beautiful, but he could hardly believe, right, that in 3 days, all of this he is seeing here will be totally destroyed. Because also everything at the beginning of the apocalypse, people and humans suddenly started turning into zombies. Strange gods decided to suddenly appear as well, but even though some humans gained those little extra powers, they couldn't, last for very long. And right after their fall, then cities suddenly started to become a living hell because humans also started turning into demons as well. He also had that, which is the struggle for survival, right? Who could get more resources survived until the end. He even had a girlfriend but also had a best friend. But the thing is, right, his girlfriend ended up betraying him with his best friend, and on the other hand, his best friend ended up stealing her right in front of him and even sent him into an ambush. But, right, while walking around there, guess what? The bell there starts ringing. Then, holding it in his hand, he realizes the call was from Rolante, his ex-girlfriend or his current girlfriend here, who was calling him. Knowing this, then he takes it and answers. As soon as he answers, she already comes with her usual talk, saying that here that Zia Ya was basically taking too long to answer her call. And also because of this, she was already wanting to break up with Xao Yan. These were the things she used most in her past life. It was always Xao Yan who heard this coming from her and tried to calm the situation, inventing millions of excuses and also becoming almost her little puppy, doing everything she wanted. But now it will be different. Now he asks her, right, to go ahead with her idea, that they should break up. She, confused, asks what for. He repeats that he wanted to break up with her already, and also following this thing there, it was already annoying him too. So also, right, it would be a good moment to break up with this annoying person. So then he takes the necklace and hangs up on her just like that. Then, after hanging up that call from that ex-girlfriend of his, we finally observe him a bit more seriously. The reason is that now he wants to start everything but a bit better. Like now he wants to start reforming everything he did in his previous life, but in a way, 10 times better. So for this, he goes to the best spots to get the best equipment and also the best hackers. Hey, that right? Our hero hung up that call. And even more, right in her face, our Xao Yan, that traitor. We see her from here already in her room. Irritated, she grabs this there and throws it aside. She is sad, but at the same time quite pissed off with our protagonist. One of those things is that he left her called right in front and also in her face. And so she is pissed off with our protagonist. We just look to the side where we find that guy, the best friend of our protagonist. In this doubt, he answers her that maybe, possibly, I don't know. He found out about the relationship that the two were having there. But she said no. He could discard that since that guy was stupid. He knew nothing. Because also that guy was her little dog. Because whatever she ordered, he followed. If she also asked to see if he went to Miami to check how sunny it was that day and came back, he would do it on the same day or maybe the next one. And also the guy was whipped, so there's nothing more to worry about. And also, how could he possibly be finding out all this that they did? The two of them were just cheating on our protagonist, maybe right in front of him. But well, a friend of Xao Yan asks her not to be angry, since her own grandfather also asked that he went to do some things. One of those things is basically starting to collect some inheritances from the old family that had some type of spiritual energy inside that. He also started saying to him that something big could really start in this world. But now that he touched on the subject of inheritance, this traitor here ends up saying that the Im of our protagonist possessed a talisman. But for some reason she had seen it before. But that was old and worn out. It seemed that it had been in her hand for years, or maybe even centuries, which caught his interest. He then approaches the aim of our protagonist. At this moment, he wonders where this could possibly be, just like the whipped girl also said that it was with Xian's sister. Now he asks that he relax, since Xian at some point could basically return to normal. At the moment, he was crazy, but he will come back, and as soon as he returns to normal, he will be whipped for her again. So he asks that he takes that talisman and gives it to her, and as soon as he gives it to this guy here. And surely his crazy strategy here will work perfectly. Nothing will go wrong unless he stops being whipped. Then the story changes. And as he says that, they start doing some things there, but our scene unfortunately ended up cutting to another place. Ended up cutting to a rather old talisman. This was the talisman that girl mentioned just now, and XAO Yan ended up kind of receiving that from his sister. And so when he takes that talisman there, we see his sister wondering why suddenly he decided to take that thing. And moreover, he ended up running more than 30 kilometers by taxi to get to her, to get that thing. It must be something important. Moreover, she notices something strange in his eyes. They changed color. This surprises her. So our protagonist only asks one thing from his sister, to trust him. She, who never distrusted anyone, ends up saying that she would trust our protagonist. Moreover, she approaches him and says that siblings should trust each other. Until now, she has always trusted him. And she also tells us that of the people she trusts most, XAO Yan was the one she trusted most. So if it was to ask for anything, she would most likely follow. And here she would follow indeed, for she would survive an apocalypse. So then he only asks that she go straight to school. After finishing school, he asks that she just return home. That was all he asked. Understanding this, she would do it, and thus would basically be leaving now, as she is now going to school. And maybe in 2 hours, she will see our hero again. But as she leaves, our protagonist asks her to stop again. Now that she stopped, he asks her why she still hasn't asked why our protagonist is acting this way, and also making those requests for her not to stay so far from home. She then turns and says only one thing, that she trusts our protagonist more, and also in the things she was saying maybe today something happens in the world like that. Then we watched her just moving further and further into the background. Now our protagonist saw that now he would have to be doing almost everything to make at least 2 survive. He would make her survive until the end and make those extras pay for what they did, right? But now that this was said, we then watched him looking directly at his hand, where he finds that totally old token. But now that he has this token, he tries to see if this was not different from what he saw in his past life. A possibly giant bear could come out of it, but well, maybe he will find out what's inside that token in the future or not, since at this moment we observe the eyes of our protagonist acting differently. His eyes start to glow a kind of fire. That thing starts to come out of his eyes and goes directly into that token. After that, the fire of XL Yan Trist car in that token ends up being kind of sucked into something totally different. Strange things happen. The token that was completely faded and totally old starts to light up. Then a name appears. It was the 6 Great Hells. After that, the token activates, and a portal appears again in front of our hero. Then he, seeing this portal, starts moving towards the portal to find out what's inside. Thus, after passing through that portal, we observe him in another dimension. In this dimension, he finds a house, but the house had several chains surrounding it. Something strange would happen again. Now, inside his dimension, he tries to understand what it was, because looking a little closer in these houses, there was a kind of monster in each one. Monsters that, for some reason, were sealed inside or something like that. So, he tries to understand all of this, and in the end, he ends up discovering that all these are monsters, and some are demons. And again, he approaches this house. Now he gets closer and closer to those creatures, those figures trapped inside this house, but he got too close to one of them. And now, closer than ever to these monsters, he realizes that all this was too ugly and also at the same time scary. But while he was watching this house and these monsters, some mysterious lightning starts to come out of it, and these things, these lightning bolts, start moving towards those monsters that were trapped inside this house. They are easily taken by those lightning bolts, and in the end, they may end up dying. The lightning does not stop and keeps falling there in that house for a few minutes. Now, quite surprised, our hero realizes that the lightning was draining all the monsters inside the tower. But after some time, stopping and looking at those statues being completely destroyed by these lightning bolts, XAO Yan hears a voice. This voice came from the back of the house. Hearing it, now we only see on the other side our protagonist observing a mysterious girl appearing again in front of him. Then, curious, he wonders who this mysterious girl would be. And here we are introduced to her as Sujin, a rather sly fox. But here we are also already cut to a sky. But she ends up explaining that tens of thousands of years ago, the mortal emperor gathered about 10 immortals who, well, these 10 immortals ended up building or forging together a suspended tower to seal the demons. And the thing created over time, we observe that beasts and demons, some things like that, were thrown by the gods inside it. It was like a prison. They committed horrific, horrendous crimes. And in the end, they were thrown into that place, and these lightning bolts falling on these demons are a kind of punishment for them having committed their sins in a previous life. But they suffer these burns from the lightning day and night. But the sign of forgiveness in his hand is the only way to deactivate those portals ahead. Now we also observe him understanding things, why sometimes she ends up calling him the prison warden. So, again, she calls him the prison warden, and since he was curious to know what was happening inside, he could check it out for himself. And now then, she invites him to check out some main things in there. He then just agrees, and as soon as he agrees, we then see our hero entering along with that fox into that portal. But at the moment he enters that portal, he ends up having a surprise, as this surprise was more than less expected. In front appeared some wind cuts. It was like some rays of energy flying in his direction. Those things, if they hit him, would certainly send XAO Yan already down there. For staying in this place was no longer an option. However, at that moment when that thing was getting closer and closer to catch our protagonist, his eyes began to shine in a strange way, and then fire started to come out of them. And this fire flew in the direction of that mysterious energy that came towards him, quickly destroying that thing that was about to grab our hero. And at the moment that the fire from XAO Yan's eyes quickly destroyed that fire, we then observed the fox approaching our hero. Realizing that this was basically unexpected and also quite incredible what he had just done with those powerful rays, which certainly were not weak. But she then approached him and noticed that that was the eye of fire that was the strongest in the world, and that was also a guardian that protected our hero. Perhaps it was in this way that he managed to speak to her the last time, when he was on the verge of death, which made him happy to know that she was the person behind the unknown voice he heard back when he was almost dying in his previous life. Thus, knowing this, she also introduces herself and begins to say that she also has a very powerful bond with the Zal family, and also as a deep guiding spirit as she was from this great hell. She could not stand seeing villains overpowering our protagonist and, moreover, being killed by those crazy villains back there. Also, at the moment he was dying, he felt enormous hatred and rage, which activated the Guardian of Flames in XAO Yan. She simply followed the flow and helped him go back in time. So this is the reason why our protagonist managed to do that reset. But now, with the apocalypse under our protagonist's control, and having already awakened his powers, this time things will be very different, and he will be able to do everything in a much better way. Thus, he only asks her to lead his way, to guide him to the right place where he could obtain his real power. They agree and end up following the straight path, but then they end up arriving in a gigantic room. But in this place, there is only a single light. This is the light where he manages to arrive, but for some reason, he manages to level up his soul power. He also manages to rise to the highest level. But upon rising to the highest level, the soul beasts are much more powerful, and at the moment, he cannot defeat these beasts. But to perhaps defeat the beasts, he will need to go after some soul points there to get a greater space, and also the light needs to increase in height there to be able to reach those monsters. But for now, he only has a single list selection, and at this moment our hero, looking at this thing in front of him, recognizes it. It was staring at our hero, but for some reason, standing up now, he realizes that this bear was a bit smaller than before, but still big. But also this beast looks a lot like the beast of Shinjin that was riding in his previous life, the same beast he used to betray him, also killing that maybe possible boss in his previous life. But at this moment, the beast ends up growling towards our hero, but they quickly stop. Our hero just widens his eyes, seeing that then this beast starts talking to him. The beast is happy to see that the new director has appeared, which makes the beast quite happy to see that now there is someone to be freeing her from this prison. And if our hero ever needs anything, he just has to ask her. She will do everything possible. But at this moment, we observe that the bear here was starting to lick our hero. But at this moment, the fox appears and interrupts, saying that the bear could not be doing that to our hero, for the little fox still hadn't done what he would be doing, licking our hero first. While there, the two ended up giving that special affection to our hero. Others began to say that these 1,000-year-old demon kings were imprisoned for a long time, and in the end, they ended up turning into dogs. And also, in the end, these beasts ask what is so special about that guardian, just trusting that small touch, something he shouldn't be doing so much like that. But if by chance he wants to submit to his actions, he prefers to stay here, trapped in this world here, being hit by these Z for over 1,000 years. But he is also curious to know what will be happening with that guard below. But on the other hand, we, madam, are surprised by one thing. First, it was Suji. Now it is the black bear that was trapped in here. Maybe this is the prison that keeps the legendary creatures trapped in an underworld because, looking ahead, he sees a kind of eagle, an ogre, something like that, also trapped. But looking a little closer, our hero ends up realizing that his appearance in the end could resemble something he then recognizes as Lenzin. As soon as he recognizes this monster, we observe the happy fox. She smiles and starts to say that the director was too smart for seeing that he recognized that just by looking at that thing. But in this world, monsters are basically classified as soldiers or generals or commanders. Besides, there are kings and sages and other things, but there are those guards who are at a much lower level, at the level of the suspended tower, where above that there are general-level criminals. And also, the higher the level he manages to climb, the stronger the imprisoned monsters will become. Besides, there is a saying that, right, if you manage to reach the last levels, you can even tame even those immortal-level criminals. But there was also a saying there that, in the past, there were far superior monsters, one that had the title of gods that could be controlled, but for some reason ended up being kind of lost over time. But if he works hard, the director will eventually manage to level up and move up in rank, where he will be able to control the beasts from there. But for now, he didn't need to kind of focus on trying to catch these monsters already, as he already has a bear that's quite strong. But now he also realizes that if he were to try, the monsters inside would be too formidable for him, for only the general-level beasts of the lower level are already powerful enough that he may be able to perhaps defeat them. But at this moment, our hero has a question. If he manages to reach the last floor, what will he be able to tame? At this moment, he asks himself, and doesn't even imagine what's trapped on the last floor. A good thing it wasn't, but for him, he doesn't care much about it, as it was only a matter of time for those monsters sooner or later, all of that tower will be his. But for that, he needed to get stronger. To get stronger, he had to kill monsters. But to be able to enter that tower again, some points were needed. But at the moment, he doesn't have any more points. However, to get the points, he needed to kill monsters. With that, he could enter that prison again. Furthermore, he manages to light a soul point. And at this moment, he also ends up discovering one thing: that the power of the soul and the power of abilities are different from each other. Abilities should basically be obtained by killing monsters. You can absorb the zombie crystals and mutants' cores. But for you to get a soul power or something like that, it was necessary to kill a god. By doing so, you get it, but still, he needed to prepare because there were still 3 days left. 3 days and everything here would be starting. The monsters would be invading the earth. He might start perhaps becoming stronger and stronger to the point where he could take revenge, perhaps becoming the strongest in the world. But for now, he needed to make all the initial preparations to start that party of ours. But meanwhile, in a city called Old Street Ramos, he is walking, but in his previous life, someone for some reason tripped over one of the immortal ropes and in the end became a power user in this same place. And also, if by any chance he still remembers his past, then the treasure for some reason should still be here at this very moment, and in this place here, also, the energy of that treasure that emanated everywhere, or even of the ancient treasures here itself, cannot escape from his fire gaze here. And so, we observe our hero using that old fire gaze of his, there that he then starts to look at each one of these things in front of him. But none of these things he looked at were still worth it. But giving up, he will not. No way, because next, we then observe another person appearing. This was Sun Chan. He was basically a chief of the Sun family and also father of our SX1. Beside him, there was basically an evaluator of antiques quite recognized in this world. But for some reason, he looks ahead where at this moment, he finds our hero. But at this moment, he wonders what Shanann was doing here in this place. And he then, at this moment, ends up having the memory of his son. He comments with his son there, who asks him to at least choose real friends or at least friends he could be manipulating. He asks him not to worry so much since Sean is just a foolish guy and that he was easy to manipulate. At this moment, that evaluator of ancient jewels ends up wondering what was happening, but he says nothing happened. Since at this moment here, he just had a mere memory of the past. And they there shouldn't worry so much about our hero, because he wasn't even a stone in his path at this moment, and also here wasn't much to worry about. He was also just an old evaluator of antiques. His skills were unique, but unfortunately, most of the items here in this place are just some handmade things that for some reason are worth almost nothing. But after a while, he ended up kind of falling into a deep sleep, but for some reason he ended up kind of having a dream with his ancestors, telling him to start looking for some secret and very powerful antiques, as this would certainly help them in the future to survive something grandiose that will happen in this world. And so then he ended up kind of inviting Huang, one of the most well-rated guys in the world, for some certain evaluations, and certainly he would succeed in getting the best equipment. But at this moment, the evaluator ends up glancing quickly at one of the things that was there in those stores being sold. But at this moment then, that he ended up kind of finding this, he screams that he finally found what he wanted. As soon as he found it, the two then start walking in that direction. But quickly and abruptly here, out of nowhere, our hero appears and already asks the shopkeeper to wrap that thing up for him. This is a fair thing, but he ends up saying that this gourd over there was Diana Shi Ming's, so for its value he should sell it for a very high price, 10,000. Well, it was a high price, but for him, he thinks this is too expensive. At this moment then, he takes that gourd and then starts to look inside that thing, and after a good look, he ends up pointing to that thing and says that, look, in this thing here there was a crack. And due to this, he ended up using a small string to tie that crack to disguise it. And the price of this here now could decrease a little more, but still from his expectation and with recognition about these things. He just asks the craftsman here not to invent this story out of thin air. This thing here wasn't worth 10,000, not even in his dream, because this here was only worth 100, or at most 100 ons. He asks him to go pick something up from the street, because he wouldn't sell it for that. So he takes that thing from our hero. As soon as he takes it, we observe him leaving. But as soon as he leaves that place, we also observe the other old man appearing from behind, saying that he wanted to be looking at that thing a little more properly because maybe he would buy it. He asks the old man not to waste time and to look as much as he wanted, but he already got it. He already got the thing he needed. And he didn't even think that that little string there would be the string that was worth more than the price of that thing from the Ming Dynasty. And at that moment, he already activates that eye of his, that eye of fire. He realizes that now this was that immortal string that binds various magical treasures within it. But now that he already got the most important thing he needed in this world, he just wanted to be observing the whole scene. And at the same time, he wanted to be enjoying a bit of the show, since also in his previous life, his sister was captured by the Song family, and in the end, they were. And in the end, they stole that most precious talk from her. And also in the end, unfortunately, they used her in a blood sacrifice. But fortunately now he is not in that previous life. He can now change that, and he will not allow that to happen again. While he was already starting to imagine some things he wanted to do with that Song family, the scene here is already cut to the Song family, which at this moment, the old man said that this thing had a rather spiritual aura, but was also ancient. But as soon as he was about to talk about that gourd together with this old man to that guy in front, we observed our hero appearing from behind, calling for Uncle's son. And here he kind of gets surprised to see that he was here. He hadn't recognized him before, but now he did. At this moment, he then recognizes our hero. But at the same time, after recognizing him, we noticed that he already knew about that talisman that our protagonist had in hand. And he wanted to talk about that now, or maybe even later, as he had an interest in that thing. But our hero doesn't answer his mere question, then ends up shouting for Uncle Song. He was a rich guy, but at the same time, he wonders why a rich guy like that was looking for a mere gourd like that one. Then he kind of gets an idea. He ends up telling everyone around there that this thing he was buying was very valuable. So at this moment, the extras, after hearing this, also become interested in that thing, saying there that the most recognized appraiser in the world, who was Huang, was also there evaluating that thing, and for sure that was worth more than gold. So they run towards that, and at the same time, another one ends up offering a high amount for that gourd there first, saying that he would pay more than double what this guy from the Song family was willing to pay. Knowing this, he then raises the bid. He raises it to 20,000, but others end up saying a higher price, 30,000, and they barely raise the price, but Song gets irritated with our hero's words. He then kind of says that this gourd was his, and he would not share it with anyone. But that shop owner ended up raising the price to 100,000, and whoever bought it owned it. Knowing this, he ended up kind of offering a bit more. At this moment, we see that Sun wanted to stay behind, so he would be offering quite a high amount of money. He ends up spending something he shouldn't be spending. Well, something that was originally costing only 10,000 wons ended up in the end going up to over 50,000. And all of this was already the fault of our Xian. But Xian ends up wondering if Uncle Song was really curious to know about that family heirloom of his, and if he really wanted to know how to get that. But also, he approaches and says that he was curious to know if he really had an ancient touch of his family, and he wanted him to show it to see if that thing really existed. He then shows it, showing it to both of them, and they both get interested in it. So the old man approaches and realizes that indeed that treasure was real. So he asks Xian if he could be looking at it more closely. He only answers, "Of course not, because that belongs to my family, and how would I be letting mere people like you look at my precious things?" Moreover, this guy starts appealing to an emotional side, saying he was his son's best friend, so he could basically ask Uncle Song to look closely at that thing. And our video today already begins with our hero throwing in the direction of that old man that thing he so desired. While throwing it, he quickly turns in another direction from where the money falls into the account. Then he realizes that he can be buying a lot of food and many food supplies to be able to survive the zombie apocalypse, but he also noticed that there are many empty cells in that prison where some demons are imprisoned. But right, he could be using some of those cells as a type of warehouse to store the resources and to improve. So she comments there that any item placed inside starts to remain intact forever, which makes him a little happier. But she only asks one thing from XIA Yan, to put chicken in there. At that moment, she understands that foxes like chicken, and she is literally a fox. But at this moment, Our hero then starts making his purchases. But while buying that, people could possibly be thinking that this guy making those purchases was thinking of starting a farm. But while buying, he notices something happening. His money, the money he had just a while ago, ended up disappearing. But at this moment, knowing that he no longer has money, he can't spend anymore. So he goes in the direction of the old men. Now that he's close to the old men, he wonders if they have already seen enough of his stuff. But at this moment, he calls out to our XIA Yan and asks if by any chance he would sell that kind of talisman to them. He just agrees that yes, he would sell. But to have that item in hand, he will set a high price. 10 million. If they want it, they'll have to pay 10 million, which leaves both of them totally speechless. Knowing that he was afraid to spend all that money, he approaches the guy and wonders what's happening with his uncle, since this token here has been passed down for over 1,000 years by his family. So this price here is actually cheap, and 10 million for them was nothing. So he ends up realizing that they were not willing to buy that token since they didn't want it. He has other things to do as priorities, so leaving, he calls Song and tells him that that token there was worth basically nothing. No, that thing there was really an ancient token, but asking for 10 million was basically too much. At most, the price he would put on that would be for over 100,000 years, but beyond that, it might basically be absurd to anyone. But so, he ends up paying the old man and tells him to leave soon since he has already done his priority things today. So he simply leaves, but while leaving, he calls a certain person and asks them to gather some people from his gang. The reason was to find our XIA Yan and also find the hero's sister. As soon as they get the hero's sister, it was just to hand over to him the token he was so looking for. Beyond that, they didn't use deception on them, as they were guys who lived by trickery, and so deceiving them would not be so easy. So to finish the day, they will be making more sacrifices and needed some blood and some things. And so all this that he just said was to be prepared today. He then kind of says that earlier he wasn't in the mood to defeat our MC, but now he has given main and obvious reasons to finish off our XIA Yan. From another place, we only observe XIA Yan, happy but also afraid to see that his uncle was doing nothing. But now, he was surprised to see that he was already willing to send XIA Yan from Insekai. But it was also a shame that he no longer had what he basically needed, being extorted and having his money completely taken. But doing this little by little, the debt he has against him will be paid. And he will be doing this in the best way then, since his plans were already about to begin. From there, the scene is cut to another place where we find the sister of our hero. She had already appeared, so he could finally be going to the place where he had asked before. But while he was about to continue his journey, we observe someone appearing. The one who appeared was a teacher of XIA Yan, but as she approaches our hero, as soon as she approached our XIA Yan, she starts to wonder why our hero's frog suddenly gave up on school. Which kind of doesn't make sense since she was dedicating herself to the maximum to pass a certain test. And if she managed to pass that test, her future would be brilliant. Everything would be perfect. Still confused, she tries to find the answer, but for that, our protagonist says that unfortunately, she will have to go to a certain house, kind of temporarily abandoning school. So, she looks ahead, where she then understands that maybe this guy in front is her brother, Shanann. She was one of the best students, and also the sister of our protagonist. But here, the reason why our protagonist had this brilliant idea, since she also knew that their parents had ended up dying. But in the end, who decided to take care of her was her brother. But in the end, she didn't know that her brother would be such an irresponsible guy like that, and he is literally taking her out of school where maybe she would have a totally good future ahead. So, she again introduces herself there to our hero. She was Ban, one of the teachers in the class of our Sharian, XIA Yan's sister, and she does not agree with our protagonist's idea of making his sister suddenly leave school, since his own sister had a brilliant future ahead of her, and he shouldn't be ruining all of that. Moreover, what is so important that is happening for this to happen? But not even if maybe the earth here explodes, she will allow him to carry out this stupid idea. But After doing this, she understands that she spoke too much, so she apologizes and then introduces herself a little more calmly. Now that she is calmer, she says that maybe the student there shouldn't be leaving school so easily. At this moment, Xia Yan comments that she was a good teacher, so he understands that she was dedicating herself to the maximum in her career to help his sister have a brilliant future. But then, as a good guy, he ends up approaching her and asking her to return home soon, because going back home, she needed to do just one thing. That was just to cook some food for a few good days. Not only food, but also some weapons, because without weapons, she wouldn't be able to survive for more than a day. But the most important thing was for her to prepare a large supply of painkillers, as they would help her overcome many difficult times that were about to come. As he talks about all this, we observe her disbelieving his words, as she sees that maybe the world would be ending. It seemed impossible. Everything here was normal. What could really happen? But at that moment, our hero ends up leaving, and after leaving, she gets worried because those words were said in a very serious way, and she should worry about that, but she sighs and hopes that the future of our hero's sister is not entirely in danger. The scene is cut now, and she becomes worried. From here, the scene is cut to another place. This was the house of our Xia Yan. Now that it has arrived, we see her there, worried, and she asks our Shan what is really happening. Could something big really happen in the world? And then he turns and approaches her and says, yes, something big is going to happen in the world, and then our hero hands her that pendant from before, which those guys were so interested in. He asks her to put it on and not take it off, and also not to leave the house, because if she left the house, it was very likely that some bad things could happen to her. And having said that, we observe her becoming happy, and at the same time, she says that she will be preparing a good meal so that they can eat there as soon as possible. After that, happy, we observe our hero leaving through the doors. He believes that that pendant there will basically protect her and the house, since the fox itself and also that big bear of ours, who is trapped inside that dimension there, was trapped inside that token. So, he shouldn't worry too much, since if something bad happens, those two will be doing a favor on their own, protecting her, his dear sister there, from any invaders or any idiot who is trying to interfere in her life. But at the moment here, he has another priority to worry about. One of these was to get something totally difficult to obtain in the world: money. He doesn't know what the best idea is or how to get that cash in a really quick way, but from here, our scene is already cut to an elevator. After the elevator reaches number 1, we then observe our hero leaving. But at the exit door there, he finds his ex-girlfriend talking to some people. Here, she is surprised to see that our hero's sister wasn't at school, but well, she can't run for much longer. At some point or another, they will manage to capture them. But for that, to be able to capture our hero's sister, first, she needed to keep Xia Yan occupied for a little while. So she sees our Xia Yan, right? After seeing our hero, she wonders if he, by any chance, missed her. And for tonight as well, she invites our hero to make that good meal together with our protagonist's friend. But she said all this while our hero passed by her, at the same time giving her a little push so that this thing would get out of his way. Now that she understands that Xia Yan really ended the relationship, she approaches our Xia Yan and wonders what he really meant by that before, if he was really into ending their relationship. She even asks him to stop being childish and take their relationship a little more seriously. So she tries to apologize and says that tonight they will have a good date, the two of them. But for that, it was necessary to do some things for her first. But our MC said he wasn't. No, their relationship was already over. Besides, if he continues this relationship, it will ruin him too much. So, once again, he pushes his hand back and asks for space. Then he again asks for that thing to get out of his way. But she again refutes him, saying that he was being very ungrateful. Then we realize that she was staring at him a lot, and he even noticed that something of hers had fallen to the ground. So he asks for that to be picked up, otherwise someone would step on it. But he leaves that building. Only from her mouth, we then see her calling our Xia Yan and wondering where he was going. It was so he could be coming back to her. Then, He lifts something up and says that he sold it. Well, he shows that he sold the whole house. Here, she gets confused and doesn't understand why he decided to sell this, since this was the only house he had. If he sells this house, how will their marriage be? He himself said that there would be a marriage between the two of them, and this house was for them to live happily ever after. He then changes the subject and says that he sold it cheap since at the moment he needed money. He asked her if she wanted to buy it, but she gets confused. What got into him? He suddenly became so cold like that out of nowhere. And now, besides being cold, he's deciding to sell this house. This house was left by their parents. At the very least, this house is worth more than 3 million or something like that. So if it weren't for that house, she wonders why she would be with our hero. But she also wonders how much that house would cost. For that, our hero ends up saying that that house is being sold for about 1 million yuan. Well, if she wants to buy it, buy it. She even finds this too cheap. She thinks our protagonist is in debt, so maybe that's the reason he's wanting to sell everything he has to pay. I don't know. Debts he got into, but he ends up leaving. Now, he says to her that if she wants to buy this house, just buy it. It's all hers. She then approaches him and says she wanted to buy it. Of course, she wanted to buy it. But at the moment, she doesn't have the money. So she offers 300,000 yuan for now, and later she will pay the rest. But she ends up being somewhat surprised by our hero's response. He said he wasn't in the mood to sell in installments. No way. Did he look like the type to sell something in installments to an idiot like this? It would be crazy, since a house like this was being sold for 1 million. Who wouldn't buy it? But anyway, even our Shiran will basically be dying that same day, since our Shinju, the friend of our protagonist, will be making his plan come complete anyway. So she just needed to stall like that. So she said she would be paying the 1 million that Xiaoyan proposed. Thus she asks them to go to the real estate office where the name of our hero could be in her name. The house would now be hers. But this will be enough to stall Xiaoyan to the point where they can complete their mission, which was to take the pendant from our hero's sister. But then the scene is already cut to the real estate office, where at this moment she calls her mother and says she was making a good deal. She would only be buying the house of our Khan, her supposed boyfriend. Her mother already disagrees, saying this wasn't something she should be doing, since by doing this, she would probably end up broke. But she said she was fine, because the money would be coming back to her in a few days. So she shows there that she has a little money, but it's enough. Then she asks her mother to send the money soon to our hero, so that after solving some problems there, the money would return as soon as possible to her. Our hero wonders there if she's already finished, since it was to sign some things, and maybe the money in the end would already be returning to our hero's account. So then, we reserve her transferring the money to Xiaoyan, the amount he was asking for. After giving him the money, she asks him to spend all that money on whatever he thought to make the money vanish from his account as quickly as possible. But now that he has all the money in hand, he opens a smile and reveals to us that when the apocalypse begins in the world, that house he just sold for 1 million will lose all its value. In the end, it won't even be worth $1. And there's also something more precious. Without that 1 million she has in the account there, she will basically be unable to survive this apocalypse. But for her, it's all profit, since her new boyfriend already managed to ambush perhaps our hero's sister and took everything from her. But for that, they needed to celebrate since they sold a good house to her, and also maybe got that pendant from Xiaoyan's sister. So she asks them to go back as soon as possible to the house to make a good celebration. While she was happy about that, the scene here is already cut to another place. This was the house of our hero. While some thugs, better friends of Xiaoyan, were walking through it, they end up discovering that they took our Xiaoyan earlier than they were imagining to the house. This even seemed to be making things easier for them. It even seems like fate was on their side. But before everything, they needed to complete their mission, and for that, they needed to go up as quickly as possible to the top floor. Now going up to the top floor, they would have a conversation that was reasonably not at all educational with the sister of our Xiaoyan, but while they advanced little by little towards the door of our hero's house, we observe in the background our Aunt Ruan, the sister of our hero, preparing a good meal for them. While she was preparing, We observe that amulet on her neck, except that the amulet was normal until the point where it began to turn red, which means something is really going to happen. So here, the scene is already cut to a good moment later, where we observe them all there in readiness, waiting to be able to attack our hero's sister. But for that, they needed to knock on the door. So they end up knocking on the door and calling for our hero's sister. Then she goes towards the door and tries there to open it, but before opening the door, she needed to see who was there. So she starts to look through the peephole of the door where she sees a person outside. This person asks her to open the door because they needed to have a good conversation about our hero. But at this moment, she realizes that maybe if she opens the door, nothing good is going to happen. She even thought about opening it. But at the moment she thought about opening that door, she remembers Xia Yan had said before that she should never, at any moment, open the door, because if she opened it, it's very likely that good things would not happen to her. So, she just asks Shinju, our hero's friend, to wait until our hero comes back because she will not open that door at all. He could leave. Coming in, he starts banging on the doors and wonders if by chance she, the sister of our hero, wasn't on his side since he was quite an interesting guy, since he could be getting things that she might be desiring so much in the world. But she just feels sorry. She's not going to open that door in any way. So, this guy here turns to his companions, and there was someone there who had some ways to be opening the door in a kind of unusual way. He approaches the door and starts fiddling with some things there. They spend a good time doing that kind of thing here, and opening the door for him like this is no problem at all. So this door here is not an issue, but before threatening her, he comments there that a certain symbol of his family was with her, and at this moment, defensively, she decides to say that her brother, for some reason, left that with her. So the door, saying this thing, they end up agreeing, which then gives them the reason to go inside. The door ends up being forced open. After everyone enters, we then see them approaching her. At this moment, one of them decides to grab her hand, which makes her completely defenseless. Now that they have entered, they start mocking her a little, but now he approached that thing that his father wanted so much. But now that he got that lemon, he could be mocking and humiliating our protagonist from here on out until the end of the world. But not understanding anything, defensively, she wonders about the Lord, or reason he was acting this way. And for that, he opens a smile and starts answering that he is not a good friend. Not since he is a guy who was basically humiliating our hero, but he did it behind the scenes too. He carries a lot of shameful things that he did behind his back. Still, here he approaches her again. But here he has to thank our protagonist for meeting such a beautiful and good girlfriend like that one. Maybe of all the bad things that Guy has, one thing he has is good taste in women. He likes some women who are a bit sadistic and who like money more than the person. One thing is for sure, he was stealing our hero's girlfriend. But she has nothing to do with it. So she just asks that this guy let go of her once and for all. But as soon as she says that, he suddenly decides to slap her in the face. So after this slap, we see that they were planning some more things there to do to her, since, right, what they would be doing would be humiliating our protagonist more and more, and this would be for his revenge. So all these guys start approaching her. What they will do, I don't know. But in the background, someone says that what they were doing wasn't a good thing. But how about being in a very calm place, full of pools, and surrounded by beautiful women? That would be nice. As soon as this voice speaks, we observe the light on the ceiling. At this moment, the people there get scared of it. But the scare they had doesn't go very far since, right in front of them, they see several beautiful girls next to them, serving them good food and high-class food. Deluded by them, we see each of them falling for their talk. Meanwhile, we observe one of them serving meat to this guy who was the best friend of Xia Yan, but behind him appears another girl who wonders if that meat was really good. He just agrees, saying that it was. So, this was good since it was also good to see their own king eating his own meat. With a completely serious face, she starts doing some things, which makes everyone at that moment scared, seeing that, beneath them, The river that was here had turned into a river of blood. His friend there maybe wasn't in this world anymore, but he was still alive, or maybe wasn't anymore. But then, looking ahead, they saw several skeletons. But another one worries more about the wine he drank and the meat he ate. These words make the fox sad, saying to them if by any chance the meat and wine they were given weren't satisfying them, then for that, she will be giving them one of the weirdest meals of their lives, but they could be choosing. But right, I just won't say what they could be eating there.